All right, welcome back. So we got the 62 in the shop again. The other night, Michael came over and stopped by on his way back from Summit, and he went over the tune-up and showed me everything I did wrong, and cleaned up and fixed a lot of the things in the tune-up. One of the key notes was knock sensors and motor plates. I knew better, but I was excited that I could run knock sensors because I thought it would be beneficial. But in the back of my mind, I was thinking that with it being solidly mounted to the frame, that it could be problematic. But I was thinking that we would be able to desensitize them enough to where maybe we could get something out of them. But just sitting there running, it was pulling 15 degrees out of timing. So I had to turn that off, and he fixed a lot of the other things. The air-fuel ratio at idle was a bit lean, so he fattened that up a little bit, and then worked on the idle and startup and stuff like that. The things that I'm not very good at. So anyway, I'm glad that he was able to get it where it'll crank up and run. It's nice and steady at idle. And so then we took it and started doing some driving on it, dialoguing it and watching everything. We started rolling into it, and we had like a little, like pulling the motor down, kind of a little burble. And so he dialogued it and looked at it, see what it was. And so it was where before I had the meth coming on at about 8 psi, and this setup is on the pump down here, and it's not pulse width modulated or anything like that. It's either spraying meth or it's not. So that was what was going on. So the VE table was just wildly inaccurate, and the Holly was adding a lot of fuel. So at 8 psi or so, the VE was like 120+%, and that just ought not to be. So again, we drove it and saw that, and then he cleaned up that area of the VE table. And then again, the knock sensors, it was knocking out 15 degrees of timing pretty much all the time. So with that being said, when I drove it the other day, I drove it almost 70 miles the other day, and met a guy and sold some parts. So, I thought it'd be a good opportunity to drive it, put some miles on it, and check everything out. See if my gauges worked and check the calibration and whatnot. So the speedometer was actually accurate. The pulse per mile for this gauge cluster was 16,000. So in the Holly, what I did is I went to the transmission parameters and then set it up to output a pulse per mile, and then wired that to the gauges. And then again, there's several different ways you can set it. So as long as it's getting a signal, you can calibrate it to where you either set it up at a mile and drive it a mile and then press the button, and then it calculates it and does it off of that. Or if you can make your ECU output the correct 16,000 pulses per mile, then it's accurate. So if your other data, your transmission ratio, your tire height and gear ratio and all that's accurate, then the 16,000 pulse per mile will be accurate. So I was happy to know that was accurate. One thing was the temp sensor was not accurate. It just stayed hung down, and there was like an isolator that came on the sending unit, and I kind of looked at it and didn't really know what to do with it. So I put it on and then put the ring terminal on it, and then the washer and the nut, and apparently it isolated the signal. So before Michael came over, I swapped the plugs out, so I pulled that isolator out, and then the temp gauge did work, thankfully, because the keyed output to my relay for my fan, somehow I lost keyed power to it, and the new fan was not coming on. So this should be about a 160 degree thermostat. It's a stock thermostat with holes drilled in it to make it lower temperature. The thought process behind that is with a lower thermostat, you can just determine when you want the fan to come on to try to get it to run the temperature you want. And the only problem is during winter, it doesn't matter about the fan because it's going to be colder. So it's more of a summertime kind of deal. And once we got the fan working, that fan sure enough pulls some air, and it knocked the temp down immediately. That fan really pulls some air. Like I say, it's supposed to be it's a Proform brushless fan, and like it kind of turned like once or twice when it got power, and then that thing just started pulling air through that thing, and the temperature gauge just dropped. I guess it'll be that way. So I was glad to know all that worked, and we were able to get that taken care of before we went and drove it. So we went and drove it. He fixed where the meth was coming in from before, turned off the knock sensors, again, cleaned up a couple things, and the tune would start up and idle. So then once we start pulling in the power, after turning off the knock sensors, we heard a lot of knocks. So again, this engine is about 11-to-1 compression with LS9 head gaskets, and I went to a Cosmetic head gasket that's a little bit thicker, and based on the calculations that I performed, it should be about 10.5-to-1, which is still not ideal. I kind of got spoiled with my 6.2 that was in the Caprice, because I had put pistons in it, and it was about 9.2-to-1 compression. They were Steve Morris pistons and dished and everything, and so and I didn't think about it when I got this engine and the Denali and everything, and then I was looking over, LS3 specs, and I was like 376 cubic inches. I was like 11-to-1 compression. I was like, oh man, I did not think about that. And then the Liberty heads have a smaller combustion chamber than an 821 or an 823, so that makes it even higher. But the L92, it has valve reliefs, 2 valve reliefs in the piston, so allegedly that knocks it down minus 4 cc's. So allegedly, with the L92 is around 10.5-to-1 compression. But like I say, again, you put the Liberty heads on it and then it shoots it on up. So anyway, that was a problem we were running into. The other thing is historically we've had great success with running a TR6 plug and less than 10 pounds of boost or 12 pounds of boost, something like that. We would run a TR6 plug on pump gas, and it actually would make more power than a BR70F. Now, above that boost level and on E85, then yes, the BR70F is the plug of choice. But again, just rolling on autopilot, I just bought TR6s, so when Michael got here, I was putting in a fresh set because I didn't want the plugs to affect his tuning abilities, and I wanted him to have a good fresh start on tuning it. So actually the plugs that were in it didn't look bad, but when I drove it to meet that guy, I don't guess I finished that part. I got out there, first thing I did is look under the truck, and then it's like oil everywhere, and I was like freaking out. So what happened is I have a T on the port at the oil pan to run the sending unit for the Holly and the gauges, and I had used that paste to seal the threads, but apparently it did not work. So while it was running, it was just leaking past the threads on the 1/4-inch pipe nipple, 1/8-inch pipe nipple. So I was freaking out. I was like, how much oil have I lost? Just running everything through my mind. How am I going to get home? I'm 40 miles from home. So then I ran into some guys that worked at it's a peach packing company. So these guys actually had a roll of Teflon tape and then got me some oil, and they're very courteous, very nice people, and I greatly appreciate them helping me out. Offered to pay them, and then they politely declined and told me just don't hurt your engine. But they didn't know, they didn't see what was in it or anything. But very kind, very nice people, and I'm thankful for their courtesy. So I pulled the sending unit off. Used a little bit of I was on their last strip of Teflon out of their little roll. So, but it was enough to seal it. Got it on, got the oil in it, and got it back home. Noticed that the fuel gauge was down a lot, and I was just like, that's just kind of weird. And I don't know how this fuel gauge operates, because you have to set up the sending unit for this tank, and it has a rod and then a float, and then you have to like measure it and then set it up. And I was like, maybe I biffed the length setting it up and whatnot, and maybe that's inaccurate, but I know better than to trust that. So the gauge is telling you something, you better believe it until you prove it otherwise. So I put fuel in it, and it took, I think, 10.3 gallons, and the odometer was at 66 miles. So if you run the numbers on that, that's 6.4 miles to the gallon. Not impressive in the least bit, especially when I was just cruising there running 60 on the way there and then 60 on the way back. Did not get in it whatsoever until I wanted Michael to look over everything, because that will destroy things quicker than anything is getting into boost in an untuned engine. So I'm at least that intelligent. So anyway, come to find out what it was the knock sensors were just pulling all the timing out of it, and it was just wreaking havoc on everything. So Michael got all that squared away. We went and pulled it again. Again, we heard more spark knock detonation. It pulled like a freight train though, but as soon as I heard it, I let out of it. He looked at it, he pulled a bunch of timing out of it, and it's just, then he asked what plugs I had in it. So now I'm going to go down to a NGK 1085, which is a 9 heat range plug, and these are 6 6s. So we're backing down to a colder plug, and then we're going to try to put the meth turning back on higher in the boost range, because it's really not doing much. I mean, you really don't benefit from meth at below 10 pounds of boost is what I've read. So we're going to try to set it up where it turns on based on an inlet air temperature sensor, RPM, and there's one other parameter. But the intercooler did very well. So Treadstone 1200 horsepower intercooler, but it's mounted under the truck in the most not ideal position. But of course it was cool because it is winter. So inlet air temps were very low, and but the takeaway from it is it cranks up, runs, and idles a whole lot better, and it will absolutely murder the tires on this thing. It is incredible how, I mean, you just hardly do anything, and it's just blows the tires off all the way up the road. So yes, and I know we want video of this, so I promise I will try to get videos of this one, because this one is not going anywhere. Usually these are for a customer or somebody or for me, and then it's sold the next after I make this video. So this one is not going anywhere, so I hope to have some drive videos of it and follow along better with it. I got the headlight rings, which were chrome, and tried to disguise them, but that didn't turn out too good. And then I see that one of my adjusting plastic pieces has come loose and the headlights cocked like that. And somebody high beamed me when we were driving the other night in this thing. I was not happy about that. I do not like when people high beam me when I do not have my high beams on. But I was like, these things are not that bright. But anyway, they were in a newer Ford with the super bright light. So anyway, I got felt coming for these things because there's really nothing there. So I'm excited to get some felt in there, and the door closures work pretty good. Here we have some the bottom of the doors. We got those from Summit. So the bottoms on these doors, you can see right here, this one's pretty bad. So that's really the only issues with the truck. So I'm gonna get these graphed in there and get the bottoms of the doors fixed, because that bothers me. And it's funny because the door on the other side, it's come loose all the way up in here at the seam, and then this one's out here. So I don't want to use the whole patch panel and come above this rib, so I'm just gonna probably just come right below the rib and lay it over it and cut it in and get it welded up, and then try to hide it back in with the, what do I think they call this paint, fawn or something like that. But yeah, so there's the gauges, and it's neat because it does have an odometer. So I've put 83 miles on the truck so far, which is kind of cool, because with the Holly, historically you couldn't run an odometer, which was kind of silly in my opinion. I think you can do it now, but like I say, historically you couldn't do that. So and I would like to get a radio in here. I don't know if I could hear it, but it would be nice to have a radio. And but yeah, other than that, that's about it on the interior. I do have to adjust the steering wheel to get it where it points straight. The electric steering, it is doing pretty good. One hiccup we had was the M18 fitting that goes into the rack, the Dodge rack. Why they used a Dodge rack, I don't know, but it's a Ford electric pump from a Volvo, and it's a hot rod. So the thing kept leaking. I used one I had in my box initially. I don't know what it came from, but it fit, and then I thought it would seal. It did not seal. I would come in and there'd be a puddle on the floor, which drives me insane. So I went and when I was at Summit and bought these, I bought the part number that these people recommended for their rack for this kit, and it still leaked. So I was like, well, that's the last straw. So I pulled it out, mixed up some JB Weld, wiped the threads, ran it in there, and it has not leaked. So knock on wood. But this thing is insane to drive now, with the tune cleaned up. Very excited with it. Once I get the Kohler spark plugs in it and drive it around some and everything, I'm going to catch up with Michael and get to the dyno, and we'll see what this thing puts down. Michael's thinking that with the meth and everything, we should be able to squeak out 750 or something. I don't know if that's going to be possible, but regardless, it's not a race truck or anything. It's just it's just a street truck until it becomes a race truck, and then we know how that goes. So they do have like a little drag and drive thing around here that this guy started up. So I may try to just see what it does, but again, I know myself too well, and if I do that, then again, it's just going to go full race car and just go downhill from there, and then it'll be unrecognizable and unenjoyable to drive as a truck, and I don't want that to happen. But I would like to make a pass in it. So, but I know I do want to do the 4-link on the rear, and I've been watching the videos on that, trying to figure out what parts I need and how to set it up and everything. because I think that'd be really neat to have the 4-link rear on coilovers to match the front. And I've always wanted to build my own rear suspension like that. So, but I have a lot going on right now too. So anyway, that's enough for now.